There's no way these guys are fusing.
Get him! Get him!
You know, maybe they're just using it in chat, which is a thing.
They all have a similar playing pattern. Very
not really
similar
do as much
playing
damage.
But if they were in the same plan, they would literally
I
do
thought
the
it
same
would. I
thing.
get up there, I
pattern. Yeah, I
can.
know. However,
This is literally more coping. You're coping so hard, and it's amazing.
God, that's not.
Watch
Oh, yeah,
out.
on me. Fuck. Ah.
I tried, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm dead.
I died fucking
Can
trying
I?
to save that.
What?
How does it feel to be trying to do Chaos Waste while you have a Destiny 2 player coping in your ear?
It's awful.
Honestly, it's a challenging link.
Alright, Seth.
Ah!
I believe in you.
I know you do, baby. Because I believe, all you gotta do is believe in yourself. Oh shit.
Hey, Seth, do you have a
It's a
twin
little more
called
complicated
Cody?
than that. You can't just believe in yourself. You have to actually, you know, have skill.
Hey, I have more skill than Bacon does in Destiny at least. Come on, man.
Probably true.
Snap.
Am I even going the right way? I have no idea if I'm going the right way or
Yes,
not.
you are.
Oh,
then
hey,
it's
look,
each
trial
with
chest.
action, right? Like,
Twist. We got twisted.
Alright.
We are really fucking far.
Alright. Oh,
Oh.
whoa! Oh gosh, that did a lot of damage.
Seth, use your potion of endless bombs.
I can't!
only hope. It's literally your only
yourself.
hope.
Believe in yourself.
Oh yeah,
Yes, yes.
Oh, I could be dead. No!
Speaking of which,
A monster was about to charge me and I wouldn't have had enough health to survive, so I tried to grab a blur. But
So what-
unfortunately...
Being the first time that this is you playing Chaos Waste, what are your thoughts about what just happened?
Pretty much the same thing as regular Cataclysm. I always have to bail my team out because I'm the only one that survives long enough. For the longest time making these videos, I always believed Kerillian to be my direct counter. My Kerillian to Avatar Aang's Earth, if you will. In fact, before my Ranger video was in the works, I had actually decided on the Shade and even had the script, video, and audio ready to go. But instead, I decided to postpone it and rewrite a couple of things due to some frustrating difficulties? Fast forward 3 episodes later, and here we are at episode 13 of the Career Showcase series. Here's what I've already done, here's what we have left. And as a little bonus, I have decided that any character whom I have already done 3 out of 4 careers on shall not receive their 4th installment until episode 17 or later. Meaning after this video, the only careers I can explore are Sienna's Pyromancer and Unchained, because Sienna's 4th career is yet to be announced, along with Kruber's Huntsman or Foot Knight. But I'll be frank with you, it's gonna be Foot Knight. And there was a certain possibility that Waystalker could have gone before Shade, but at the last minute I worked some things out, and in general have gotten better at her melee combat and mechanics, and so that leaves us in the present day with the finalized product, the Shade career. And indeed, what a career she truly is. The Shade is given a lot of unique abilities, some stacking onto her already existing ones, and others offering something else, which even still are very welcome additions to her arsenal. And the unshakable foundation for the Shade as a whole resides in her abilities and skills. Starting off with the bread and butter of her class, all damage dealt from behind the enemy is doubled. Not only that, but she is given 2 different ways of getting there, both of which involve going invisible. The first, and perhaps more notable method, coming from her career skill, not only giving her a seamless trip to the backs of her enemies, but also amplifying the damage she deals upon her next strike. It's also just a generally good way of getting out of trouble or going out of your way to pick off a special or 2 hidden away behind a horde, which by themselves are worth their weight in gold. This ability can one-shot everything up to a Chaos Warrior and deals respectable damage to bosses and lords. And then we have her perks, which all have excellent synergy with each other. Starting off with the game changer, her blur. Basically put, You block an attack just before it lands, you dodge afterwards, the enemy forgets you exist, you quickly reach around their back, and poof, the man is no more. This thanks in large to the fact that her non-career skill perk still guarantees a critical strike in both situations, along with the fact that a charged critical hit instantly slays everything below a Chaos Warrior. See what I mean here? Synergy in all caps. Unfortunately, she doesn't have any perks, abilities, or skills that indicate she'd be good at hordes, which, if you know anything about me, you'll know I'm a huge fan of. As the small fish in a big pond, it is best to understand your limits in this regard and don't push yourself too hard. Relying on and sticking close to teammates is never a bad idea. Staying away from open areas where being surrounded comes more easily helps, and getting good at your blur perk will go a long way to ease the burden of your shortcomings. If you do find yourself in a tight spot, one good way to farm blur would be to push and hold block, as pushing resets your parry counter, allowing you to more easily escape. Oh yeah, and she has an unlisted 5% crit chance bonus, giving her a ceiling of 20% crit chance. Although she may not be a game changer against hordes, she is given a lot of tools to mow down the elites and monsters of the world. Heck, I still get the most damage of any of my teammates most of the time. A few quick notes before we switch gears and talk about talents. Sometimes when you are invisible, enemies might still track you, so be careful about that. Nothing you really have control over until Fat Shark addresses it in a patch. There is a talent that gives you 2 counts of infiltrate, and I wanted to address that because I know how confusing it can be. Simply put, if you attack, and the attack does not come at roughly the same time against one enemy, your weapon will consume both counts of infiltrate at once, which can be very, very frustrating. You can solve this by either switching to the javelin, which is infinitely better and can still one-shot Chaos Warriors from the front, or practice your technique, being aware of the environment around you, where you're aiming, and how many enemies could potentially get in the way of your intended target. Alright, now to the talent pool. Considering the Shade's low health pool, having a reliable way of regenerating some temporary health is pretty important. Kane's Trust takes advantage of what the Shade is good at and isn't necessarily terrible against hordes. Vigor arguably does better against hordes or against single targets that don't go down in a few blows. And considering the Shade can have up to 20% crit chance along with a plethora of crit moves, either option can bring success. A huge part of playing Shade is knowing what types of damage you want. Cruelty makes your invisible moves even more devastating, but considering how you already one-shot man-sized enemies from behind anyways with a crit, you could argue its usefulness is really only in situations where a crit doesn't one-shot stuff, like hordes or monsters. I mean, hey, a 20% chance of dealing 50% more crit damage? Not too bad if you ask me. In fact, I actually run with that a lot. Exploit weakness it's just so bad. Why would you do that to yourself? No. The only scenario I have found where it is useful is if A, you are using the 5th attack pattern on a javelin, and B, against enemies that have the health to last that long. Situationally, not super common. But then you have this guy, a talent that rewards you for consecutive headshots. More importantly, however, is arguably one of the easier ways of dealing damage from the front. Cruelty and Huntress are both pretty good. I personally would prefer talents that help me the most against my weaknesses, and I can appreciate not being locked into doing bonus damage from just behind. Talent set number 3, I like Smiter and Assassin. Assassin works to Kerillian's strengths, aka her crit damage, and has some synergy with Huntress and Vigor, but I wouldn't say you're crazy to go with Smiter. Talent set number 4 gives you an option that further works to the Shade's strengths, allowing her to deal up to 50% more backstab damage, and for those of you who suck at aiming, such as myself, you have an option of recovering some ammo whenever you get a backstab. But perhaps another talent that shouldn't go unmentioned is Focus Slaying, which gives you roughly 100% ult regeneration for 3 seconds, resulting in 4.29% ult reduction every time you get a backstab kill. Nothing too crazy, but considering the whole worlds that open up for you when you have your ult on standby, I'd say it's worth missing out on Chainkiller. Now, if you know anything about me, you'll know that I love damage reduction. And luckily for us, we happen to have a relatively easily attainable method of damage reduction simply by getting a critical hit. The other two options you're given both focus on movement speed, and to be honest, I don't know why Glade Runner can't be replaced with something else. And at last, you have the career skill talent set. The first one I'd like to touch on is Hungry Wind, which takes the damage aspect of your career skill and removes it, instead focusing on situations better fitting hordes. I don't know, it's cool, but it takes away too much of what makes a shade a shade. Shimmer Strike has an incredible and more versatile concept, don't get me wrong, but opinionatedly, low practicality. The perfect situation for this talent is when you're facing a high number of elites. You get behind everything and mow them down one by one. But to me, there are just too many factors that could easily break the chain. First, you have to be in a situation where it will be worth trying. But if you hit a regular enemy, the chain breaks. Not hard to do. If you can't catch up to the enemy you're attacking, the chain breaks. Not hard to do. If your swing accidentally hits 2 enemies, the chain breaks. Not hard to do. If your enemy doesn't move how you think it's going to, and instead you get a side body kill, you guessed it, the chain breaks. Not hard to do. There are just so many different ways that at any moment the chain you were counting on could break. It's just not reliable enough to me, which is why I stick to Cloak of Pain, granting you 2 counts of infiltrate, plenty of time to make your move, plenty of damage. All of this is not to say that Shimmer is bad. In Fortunes of War, I can see this being the meta, but it's just not for me. As far as range weapons goes, I'd recommend either the longbow or the jav. Conservative shooter for both. The jav can be really helpful for simplifying how you use your infiltrate and has excellent penetration for hordes. It is a little janky, so pick and choose your openings wisely. For melee weapons, I'd recommend a dual weapon with at least 1 dagger. Reason being, you can still get the damage of the daggers along with the push cost too, since you push with the dagger, only consuming half a stamina bar, allowing you to more easily acquire blur. For the trait, I'd recommend either Resourceful Combatant or Parry, which would make the transition from parry to blur a bit more seamless, since there's always the chance of an enemy's overhead strike breaking your entire stamina bar, staggering you in place for a bit. For properties, I'd go Stamina and Crit Chance. It's helpful to remember that unless your weapon has a default 3.5 stamina bars or more, it will always be mathematically more worth it to invest in stamina and block cost than just block cost. Necklace, I'd go for health and block cost along with Barkskin, although Hand of Shalia or Natural Bond can work too if you're good enough to not get hit in rapid succession. Charm, I like attack speed and crit power for a little extra boss damage. I'd recommend either Concoction or Decanter for the trait, and lastly Stamina and Crit Chance for the trinket. Shrapnel for the trait. Okay, so this is normally the part of the video where I begin my conclusion. However, I do want to add an interesting pointer on how the Shade's career skill interacts with her talents and properties. As we are all aware, you can make your boss and lord damage stronger by adding Cruelty, Crit Power, and Chain Killer to your arsenal. But what's even more interesting yet is how those damage buffs impact the overall damage. May I introduce to you the damage chart. Each damage bar indicates how much damage a Cataclysm, Cloak of Pain, charged sword and dagger attack will deal when using certain talents and perks. Interestingly enough, Chain Killer does almost no extra damage. Even Crit Power is stronger. Add on to the fact that Cruelty is outrageously stronger, and you begin to see how Fat Shark coded Infiltrate in the first place, aka mostly boosting the crit damage in comparison to the backstab damage. It also better explains how you can one-shot Chaos Warriors from the front with the Javelin. Ultimately, you can deal up to 40% more damage if you equip all 3, but you can actually do more if you add another 20% crit power on your melee weapon. And if by some miracle you can pull off a couple of attacks to the head, you can deal even more damage than you could ever hope to do from behind. And that's the Shade for you. Definitely one of the more unique damage dealers out there, and she can do a really good job at what she is designed to do. But always remember, at least for me, playing Shade is hard. It's unforgiving and relentless. If you want to excel with her, the answer isn't automatically maxing out all the chips that gear towards backstab or all buffing. It's about finding what you're comfortable with, and spoiler alert, when you lose to a monster, 9 times out of 10, it won't be because the monster outplayed you, it'll be because it's never alone. And as far as team support goes, I'd highly recommend throwing some crowd control careers around her. It would go a long way to relieve the burden of her weaknesses. Something to the helper tank ability would go a pretty long way too. But yeah, like I said, very unique damage dealer, and it doesn't all have to be from behind. She can get a lot done, especially at the higher levels of play, and frankly, I'd be hard pressed to tell you that this video was not easy to make. The script alone took 8 hours and 3 redos to write, and the gameplay took a great deal longer. But in the end, it doesn't matter because I am determined to see this through to the end. It might take some time, but I'll get there eventually. So thank you all so much for watching episode 13 of the Vermintide 2 Career Showcase series, and I will see you all in the next video. Later, peoples.